Welcome to Griffy Lake Nature Day. We hope you're ready to watch and learn as we explore our local environments. Remember, you must follow along in your student journals and use the materials provided in your Nature Day activity kits to complete today's lesson.
Hi, and welcome back to Griffy Lake Nature Day. My name's Kate Cedar, and I'll be your naturalist for this station. We are at the Basic Botany Station where we will be learning about botany, which is the study of plants. We'll be looking at the different parts that a plant has, the life cycle of plants, as well as how these plants are specialized to their environment, looking at the plants that call Griffy Lake their home. As we go through the activities of basic botany, make sure you're following along in your student journal on the pages that say basic botany. The first thing we're going to look at is the parts of a plant. Now, there's so many different kinds of plants out there. We're going to try to focus on our herbaceous plants. Herbaceous meaning they don't have wood like our trees in the forest here. Now, trees definitely have a similar structure to a lot of our herbaceous plants, but they have a little bit extra anatomy going on. This is a basic drawing of a herbaceous plant that is in flower. So we have all the way from the bottom of the plant underneath the soil all the way to the top. The flower of the plant is the flower at the top, and it is how the plant reproduces. So this is what you often see as herbaceous plants when they're coming up along. You'll see some examples later on of some of our flowering plants in the park when we talk about how seeds disperse, because after our flower comes our seed. What often makes up our flowers are petals. Petals are specialized leaves that create the flower. Petals can be a variety of different colors, and their job is to try and attract different pollinators to come and pollinate the flower. We'll talk about pollination in a little bit when we talk about the plant life cycle. The next thing that we talked about was leaves. Leaves are an important part of our plants because leaves are how the plant gets its nutrients. What is the color that most leaves are during the whole year? It's green. Leaves are green because they contain chlorophyll. And chlorophyll is how plants get their energy from the sun. So plants are very important to all of the life around us because they are able to convert energy from the sun into sugars inside the plants. And then those plants are eaten by animals, and then those animals might be eaten by other animals. But without plants, none of us would have energy, and all of that energy comes from the chlorophyll in our plant's leaves and some parts of the rest of the plant. Now, the next thing is what the leaves and the flowers are attached to. The stem is the part of our plant that connects all of the other parts of the plant, from the very bottom underneath the soil to the very top. It is able to take the nutrients from the leaves and move them all around the plant because the leaves are the ones with that chlorophyll that are able to make the energy, but all of the cells in the plants, just like the cells in our body, need that energy. So it needs to be able to move through the stem to the flower, to the petals, to other leaves, and finally, our last place in the plant, the roots. The roots are down underneath the soil and they grow as the plant is growing. The roots have a variety of uses for the plant. They're able to suck up water and other nutrients and minerals from the soil because they can't get all of their energy from light. They also have to get the parts to store that energy from the soil and the air around them. Now, roots will also take up water and put that through the rest of the plant. So that stem is taking the water and nutrients from the roots and it is putting it all up, and then the roots are taking back some of those sugars. Another important function of our roots is that it helps the plant stay in place. It clings to that soil and makes sure when the wind or something else is moving the plant, that the plant doesn't come out of the ground. So this is our completed parts of a plant, and you should be following along in your journal and have done this and completed that on your journal pages for basic botany. We talked about the different parts of a plant. Now we're going to talk about the life cycle of plants. In this, we're looking at all plants, not just herbaceous plants, but including trees as well. They go through the same life cycle. The plant life cycle is made out of 4 parts. You start with a seed. At the very top, this one here is an acorn. The seed contains all that is needed for a new plant to grow. It contains the genetic material from its parent plants and the nutrients it needs to start its life. The next step in the life cycle is for the seed to become a seedling. A seedling is the youngest part of a plant's stage. It's when the seed has germinated or kind of woken up from its seed, come through the outer hard shell of that seed and started to grow into a plant. It's still using some of those reserves found in the seed, but eventually it will be able to stand on its own and grow into a mature adult plant. In this cycle, I'm using an acorn as a reference. So it starts out as that acorn, becomes baby tiny oak sapling or seedling, depending on what you're looking at. Sapling is the young form of a tree, versus a seedling can be any young form of plant. And then as an adult, that is kind of the peak of that life cycle. It is a fully mature tree. It's able to produce flowers of its own. So an adult tree will, or an adult plant will flower. Now, this flower can be male, it can be female, or it can be both. It can have male and female flowers on the same tree or 2 different trees. But it will flower, and those flowers are how genetic material is shared between the trees. Trees can't move and be near another tree. Plants aren't able to go from one place to another trying to find another plant in order to have seeds of their own. So they rely on pollination. This next step in our life cycle is not possible without pollination. And that is when pollen, or the genetic material of one tree, is moved from one flower to another. Now, this isn't just trees, it's also plants. So in this stage of the life cycle, the mature plant has flowered and pollination has occurred, whether that's through the wind blowing the pollen or a butterfly moving some of the pollen with it. Pollination has occurred. And then that flower can close up and mature and create a fruit, which will then have that seed. So that's how our life cycle closes, with the flower gaining that pollination and becoming a seed. Some flowers can become multiple seeds. Some flowers just become one seed. But some flowers don't become any seeds because they just had a bunch of pollen. That pollen goes out to make new seeds. Then the life cycle starts over again with the seed turning into the seedling, and then the adult, and then the flower, and back to a seed. Remember, the important thing to know is that we cannot complete this life cycle without pollination, whether that's from an animal or the wind or the water. We talked about how plants need pollination because they can't move and find other plants. Now, a similar way is that plants need a way to spread their seeds. An oak tree can make hundreds of acorns, but hundreds of oak trees can't be right near where they get dropped onto the ground. So those seeds need a way to get spread out. Now, if you've ever been around an oak tree, you might notice that there are other things about trying to get those acorns. And that's one of the ways that a plant can specialize to get their seeds far and wide. With oak trees, they create a nut that a lot of squirrels like to eat. But the squirrels don't eat them at once. They'll actually go off and bury some of these seeds for the winter in a cache. And they'll try to come back to that cache and eat it throughout the winter. But they don't always find their cache again, or they make more caches than they need. So the oak seeds, those acorns that they have buried, can grow up into new oak trees far away from their mother oak tree. So, one way of seed spreading is through tempting animals to come and get the seeds. Now, if an animal eats an acorn, the acorn can't grow. However, there's a lot of fruit that animals eat, and then when the birds fly around out of the bush, and then they go over and birds poop, they'll poop out those seeds, and the seeds will start and grow a tree again. One of the other ways seeds can disperse is that they'll grow hooks or little hairs onto their seed coat, and then those hooks will grab onto an animal's fur or skin, and they'll use that to hitch a ride and eventually fall off and hopefully be far away from their parent plant. Now, one of my favorite flowers in the area is called jewelweed. Jewelweed has a really cool way that it spreads out its seeds. Right now, it's starting to seed, and if I go out and I touch one of the seed pods just a little bit, it will move underneath my fingers and spit the seeds out. Jewelweed will actually trigger itself to explode its seed capsule and spread the seeds farther around it. That's why you tend to find thicker patches of jewelweed, because it can spread those seeds a little bit farther and the jewelweed will come back up around it. Another way seeds can spread is probably something you've done yourself. If you've ever found a dandelion and you've waited until it gets all of that white fluff and you've made a wish on it by blowing out all of those seeds, you've helped spread that seed all around. And it's not just the dandelion that uses that method. Ironweed is one of our native wildflowers, and it does the same thing. After it closes up and has been pollinated, it'll open back up again. You'll see these white tufts, and the white tufts will catch the wind, and it will float up with the seed attached and carry the seed out to make a new plant. One of your activities is going to be on seed dispersal, so think about what you might want your seed to move with. Seed dispersal is very important. However, some plants are a little too good at it. We have invasive species here in Indiana and in most parts of the world. Invasive species are plants or animals that are not from this region, and when they moved into this region, they overtook parts of the area and crowded out other native species that were in the area. For example, one of our more common ones is our Asian bush honeysuckle. They make these little red berries that a lot of different birds like to eat, and that has helped it spread really, really far. And not a lot of animals like to eat it. So that plant has taken over the understory and made it really hard for a lot of other plants to try and grow up. So one of the things that we do to try to keep that down is to make sure we cut that out and cut out the invasive species before they fruit, because if we wait until after they fruit, that fruit is eaten by birds and spread around. An invasive species can disrupt our food web. So just like you might have learned in some of our other stations, or like in Fish Frenzy, if we disrupt our food web by crowding out one species or one species overtaking, it can disrupt the whole thing and make our habitat a lot different. So we want to make sure to stop the spread of invasive species by planting natives, trying to remove the invasives that are here, and make sure if we go hiking or go camping in another area that we're not bringing anything with us. We're using local firewood and we're cleaning all of our equipment before we go out. Last thing we'll talk about is how plants are very specialized towards their environments. Here in Griffy Lake, we have a couple plants that are specialized to live in a very watery environment. We have pickerel weed, which is able to be mostly underwater, have its roots submerged, and still be able to grow well, versus some plants don't like having their roots submerged because they don't get enough oxygen. But pickerel weed has specialized to be able to do that. Same thing with cattails. It's another one of our water varieties of our plants that likes having its feet wet, so to speak. One of the things you might notice in a lot of our trees is that their leaves fall during the winter. This is actually a specialization to their environment. When winter comes, there's not enough sunlight to keep the leaves out and still providing nutrients enough for the whole tree. So the leaves fall off in fall so that the tree can stay dormant. Another reason is if all of these big leaves are out and the snow comes, it can be so heavy it'll actually snap off a branch of the tree. So the trees have specialized, and a lot of them drop those leaves so that they save energy and so that the snow doesn't cause one of their limbs to snap off. Some trees, instead of going that direction, did the opposite. They created really thin needles. So, needles on our fir trees or pine trees are actually leaves. The same kind of leaves, just specialized. And those needles help still get some chlorophyll, still get some energy, but the snow will slip through them and make it so that those trees can withstand heavy snow in the winter. So those trees are specialized. Just like our flowers can be specialized for different pollinators. So if there's a lot of bees in the area and bees really like the color blue, over time the flowers that were the color blue will be able to make more and more seed than flowers that were a different color. Over time, a plant that has an advantage since birth will be able to survive better than another plant. And eventually, that random advantage becomes a trait of the species and it becomes a specialization.
At this point, you should have completed your student journal pages for this lesson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.